Hello, my name is Ocean, and I used to believe silence was strength. Until I found myself serving dinner to my sister's husband's family without a plate of my own. Until I overheard her whisper, "She'll be gone soon. This house will be ours." They changed the locks, erased my name, framed me as the burden in my own home. But what they didn't know was that the deed, the will, and every legal right to that house had my name on it. So I didn't scream, I didn't fight, I just waited. And then I served them the only thing they didn't see coming: eviction. But ask yourself, how does a family become the thing you need protection from? And when they rewrite your story, what happens when you write yourself back in? It was one of those Charleston evenings where the air held on to the warmth of the day, the scent of magnolia heavy enough to make you dizzy. I was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled past my elbows, arranging silverware that didn't belong to me on a table that technically did. My sister, Callista, had decided to host her husband's family for dinner. They'd driven up from Atlanta to see their new home, as she called it now. The words still hit me sideways every time I heard them. I could hear the laughter from the dining room as I wiped down another plate. Callista's voice carried easily, smooth, polished, full of the kind of charm that made people trust her before they should. "Make sure the cornbread's warm," she called out. I bit my tongue, slid the tray into the oven, and said, "Yes, ma'am." It came out softer than I meant. By the time I brought out the food, the dining room was glowing in the golden light of our mother's chandelier. Callista was seated at the head of the table, her husband Ronan at her side, his parents smiling as if the evening were already perfect. One of them looked at me and chuckled. "Is she your helper?" Callista's laugh was light, harmless on the surface. "Oh no, she just likes to help out." The words dropped like stones. I stood there holding a serving bowl, waiting for someone to notice there was no seat for me. They didn't. The last chair was filled by Ronan's cousin, who hadn't even removed his hat. So I served dish after dish, smile after smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Every compliment aimed at my sister sliced a little deeper. "You're such a gracious hostess. This food is divine. You really made this place feel like home." No one noticed me refilling their glasses or clearing their plates, just a quiet figure moving through their laughter. When the table finally emptied, I stayed behind. The house hummed with silence again. I leaned against the counter, too tired to feel hungry, too numb to eat. I ate standing up, one forkful of cold casserole at a time, watching my reflection in the window instead of my own family. This house used to smell like lavender, my mother's favorite. After Callista moved in, it smelled like citrus candles and disinfectant wipes. 2 years ago, they'd moved here temporarily. Ronan had lost his job. Callista said they just needed a place to regroup. I didn't argue. She was my sister, family, right? Temporary turned into permanent faster than I could blink. She replaced curtains, painted walls, rearranged furniture. She told people she was renovating, but all she was doing was erasing every trace of our mother's taste. The old floral couch was gone. So was the faded quilt our grandmother had stitched. The family pictures that once lined the staircase disappeared one by one. Around 10, I heard her heels clicking across the tile. She appeared in the doorway, still radiant from the glow of other people's attention. "Don't forget to wipe the counters," she said, tossing her napkin toward the sink. "Oh, and Mom's friends are coming over next week. I told them you'd help with their charity brunch." I looked at her for a moment, really looked at her. The pearls, the posture, the confidence she wore like armor. "Sure," I said. My voice sounded calm, but inside something shifted. A small, sharp sound, like glass cracking. She left without a thank you, humming as she went upstairs. I finished cleaning and wandered into the living room. The evening light had turned the windows into mirrors. On the far wall hung a photo frame where our family picture used to be. In its place now was a glossy portrait of Callista, Ronan, and their little boy, smiling in front of this very house. My name wasn't written anywhere, but my absence was loud enough to hear. I sat on the couch and let my eyes move around the room. Everything looked too perfect, too curated, as if she'd designed it to impress guests, not to live in. I thought about Mom. She'd wanted this home to be the one place we could always return to, no matter how far we drifted. And she'd said it during one of her last good days. "Promise me, Ocean, you'll take care of the house and each other." I'd kept half that promise. Outside, crickets buzzed in the dark. Upstairs, Callista's laughter drifted through the vents, mixed with her husband's low voice. I used to think that laughter meant happiness. Now it sounded like ownership. When the clock struck midnight, I walked through every room like I was a guest in my own life. In the hallway, I stopped by another frame, this one smaller, almost hidden behind a plant. It held a photo of me and Mom, our faces bright from a summer picnic. I traced the edge of the glass with my fingertip. It was dusty, forgotten. I wanted to take it down, to keep it safe, but I didn't. Instead, I straightened it and whispered, "I'm still here." For a moment, it felt like the house heard me. Then the air settled again, heavy with silence. I turned off the lights, climbed the creaking stairs, and paused outside Callista's door. And her voice floated through the crack. "They loved the dinner," she was saying. "It's like the house was meant for us." Her words rolled into laughter. Ronan said something I couldn't catch. I stepped back before she saw the shadow under the door. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the blank wall where my diploma used to hang. She'd moved it into a storage box last year, said it clashed with the decor. Somewhere between exhaustion and fury, I realized I'd been shrinking myself to fit inside her version of this house. I thought about tomorrow, the brunch, the endless pretending, the helping out. Then I thought about what Mom would say if she saw me now. "Don't let anyone turn you into a guest in your own story," she would whisper. I turned off the lamp and lay there listening to the sounds of someone else's home. The refrigerator hummed, the ceiling fan ticked, footsteps moved above me. And for the first time, I didn't feel like crying. I felt awake, watching, waiting. The locks had changed, the photos had changed. And soon, I realized, so had the definition of family in this house. The morning after that dinner, I drove to the library for my weekend shift. The drive was quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your chest. The streets were lined with azaleas and the air smelled faintly of rain. I told myself that when I got back, I'd make a pot of tea, maybe take a long bath, and try to forget how invisible I'd felt the night before. When I pulled into the driveway around 3 in the afternoon, the house looked the same from the outside. White columns, shutters open, flowers neatly trimmed. But something in me hesitated. I grabbed my keys and walked up the porch steps. The metal felt cool in my hand as I slid it into the lock. I twisted. It didn't turn. At first, I thought maybe I was just tired, or my hand was shaking. I tried again, harder this time. The key refused to move. I leaned closer to the door, noticing tiny scratches around the keyhole, fresh ones. Then, through the narrow window beside the door, I saw a glint of silver hanging from the new key rack inside. A gold fob with Callista's initials engraved, CM, dangling in the sunlight. My stomach sank. I called her. The phone rang once, twice. Then her voice, sweet and casual, filled the line. "Hey, what's up?" "The locks," I said slowly. "My key doesn't work." "Oh," she replied as if she'd forgotten her grocery list. "Right, we had them changed yesterday. Ronan thought it'd be safer. You know how people are these days." "That's fine," I managed, though my heart was hammering. "But you didn't think to tell me?" A pause. Then her tone sharpened, just a hint. "I figured you'd be around when we did it. Guess I forgot. You can wait till Ronan gets back. He has a spare key." Before I could say anything else, she hung up. I sat on the porch swing for a long while, staring at the front door. The wind rustled the ivy, and somewhere inside I could hear the faint hum of the dishwasher. My own house didn't recognize me anymore. When Ronan finally pulled into the driveway, he looked startled to see me there. "Oh, hey," he said, stepping out of his car. "Callista didn't tell you?" "Apparently not." He fumbled for his keys, avoiding my eyes. "We thought it was best, for security. The neighborhood's been unpredictable lately." "Right," I said flatly. "Unpredictable." He opened the door and I followed him inside. Everything looked strangely rearranged. Throw pillows embroidered with the Moors, new curtains, a rug that wasn't ours. Even the scent was different, a sugary candle that made me dizzy. My mug, the one Mom bought me when I graduated, was gone. In its place sat matching cups with gold handles. I walked to the shelf where Mom's photo had always been. It was gone, too. That night, I made myself a sandwich in silence. Callista didn't come downstairs. I could hear her upstairs, laughing on the phone, her voice smooth and happy. I wondered if she even realized what she was doing, or if she knew exactly. Later, I sat at the kitchen table scrolling through my phone. That's when I saw it. A Facebook post from Callista. Some people just don't understand boundaries. Being family doesn't mean freeloading. I believe in teaching people responsibility, even when it's hard. My breath caught. There was a photo attached, the dining table from last night, perfectly lit, everyone smiling, everyone but me, because I wasn't in it. The comments came fast. You're such a saint for taking her in. She's lucky to have a sister like you. Boundaries are everything. Some folks just don't get it. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My chest ached, not because strangers believed her lies, but because I realized how easily she'd rewritten the story. I didn't comment. I didn't call her out. Instead, I took a screenshot and saved it. People think cruelty has to be loud, but sometimes it's polite and smiling and posted online for everyone to like. Hours passed before I noticed the sun had set. The house glowed dimly with its new energy, Callista's energy. Even the shadows looked staged. I washed my plate, put it back in the cupboard, and went to my room. I sat on the bed, staring at the walls. The photo of Mom that used to hang there had been moved to the attic months ago. Callista said she didn't like old-fashioned things. I opened my nightstand drawer and pulled out the small wooden box where I kept the few things that still felt like mine. A bracelet, some letters, a keychain Mom once gave me that read, "Home is where your heart rests." As I turned it over in my hand, I heard laughter downstairs. Ronan's deep chuckle. Callista's practiced, charming tone. It hit me how carefully she performed her version of family, how perfectly she'd trained her voice to sound warm. I leaned back and closed my eyes. A memory surfaced, faint and tender. Mom and I sitting on the porch swing the summer before she passed. The sky was soft pink, cicadas humming. She held my hand and said, "If anything ever happens to me, promise me one thing." "What's that?" I'd asked. "Don't let this house become a battleground." I laughed then, not understanding what she meant. It was home. How could a house like ours ever turn into a war zone? Now, years later, I finally knew. The battlefield wasn't built with weapons. It was built with words, with lies spoken sweetly enough to sound like love. I put the keychain back in the drawer and whispered into the dark, "I won't let you down, Mom." But the truth was heavier than that promise, because I wasn't sure I had the strength to fight. Not yet. The next morning, the doorbell rang. I didn't move at first, half expecting another delivery for Callista. When it rang again, I opened the door to find a neighbor smiling politely. "Just dropping off these cookies," she said. "Callista told us you were staying with them for a bit. Must be nice having family around." I thanked her, forced a smile, and closed the door. That afternoon, I took another walk around the house. My name wasn't anywhere. Not on the mailbox, not in the photo frames, not even on the Wi-Fi password Callista had changed. It felt like I'd been edited out of my own life, line by line. When I returned to my room, I sat at the desk and opened a notebook. I wrote one line at the top of the page. "This is still my house," and I underlined it twice. That night, I began to wonder if I'd ever really been part of this family, or just a shadow in their spotlight. Sleep didn't come easy after that night. I turned from side to side, the hum of the air vent louder than usual. Around midnight, I gave up pretending and slipped out of bed. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that listens. I tiptoed down the hallway, meaning only to grab a glass of water. The moonlight slipped through the kitchen window, and that's when I heard her voice. Callista's tone was low, almost gentle. I stopped by the doorway, hidden in the shadows. She was on the phone. "She'll be gone soon," she said, her words slicing through the air like a whisper that wanted to be heard. "This house will be ours." There was a pause. I heard her laugh softly, the kind of laugh that's meant for someone who agrees with your cruelty. "She doesn't even realize she's just staying here until we make it official." My hand gripped the doorframe so tightly my nails dug into the wood. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The sentence echoed again and again, bouncing inside my head until it didn't sound like words anymore, just a sharp ringing that wouldn't stop. I covered my mouth to keep from making a sound. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even shocked. I was furious in the quietest way possible. I backed away slowly, careful not to make the floorboards creak. Upstairs, my room felt smaller than ever. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the shadows dancing across the ceiling fan. They were talking about me like I was a problem to be removed, not a sister, not even a person. By morning, the anger had cooled into something harder, colder. That day was supposed to be our mother's memorial brunch. Callista insisted on hosting it here, saying Mom would have wanted a family gathering filled with joy. The irony stung. I went downstairs early, offering to help with the food. She didn't even look up from her phone. "You can keep the kids entertained outside," she said. "I don't want too many people in the kitchen." "Sure," I replied. My voice was steady, though my jaw ached from holding it shut. I took the kids out to the backyard, where the oak trees still carried traces of Mom's wind chimes. Their small hands tugged mine as they played, their laughter mixing with the smell of cut grass. I wondered if they'd remember any of this when they were grown, or just Callista's version of it. When the guests arrived, the house filled with perfume, chatter, and the kind of polite laughter people wear like armor. I stayed near the kitchen doorway, invisible but useful. Callista floated through the crowd in a cream dress, accepting compliments like confetti. "You're such a wonderful daughter," one of Mom's old friends told her. "Your mother would be proud." Callista smiled, squeezing the woman's hand. "I hope so," she said sweetly. I bit my lip until I tasted iron. The brunch ended with a slideshow, photos of Mom through the years, a soundtrack of old gospel hymns playing softly in the background. People dabbed their eyes with napkins. Then, as the final slide came up, something hit me like a slap. My name wasn't there. Every child, every grandchild, every family photo, except mine. I scanned the faces on the screen. I appeared once, in a distant shot, blurred, half turned away. And when the final tribute list scrolled, names in elegant script, mine was gone. A guest leaned over to Callista. "Didn't your younger sister live here too?" Callista's smile tightened. "Oh, she's around," she said lightly. "She just likes her privacy." Laughter rippled. My throat closed. I excused myself before anyone saw my face. In the bathroom, I locked the door and leaned against the sink. The mirror was brutally honest. I didn't look like a daughter mourning her mother. I looked like a stranger at someone else's family event. For a moment, I thought of smashing the mirror just to see something break besides me. Instead, I whispered, "Don't let anyone write you out of your own story." It was what Mom had said to me once, half advice, half prophecy. I stayed there until my breathing slowed. Then I walked out, chin high, and started clearing dishes no one thanked me for. By late afternoon, the guests trickled out. The house smelled of champagne and lilies. Callista came up behind me, still glowing from all the praise. "You should smile more," she said softly. "It would make people more comfortable around you." I looked at her, really looked. "Comfortable?" I asked. "Like when you delete someone's name from their own mother's memorial?" Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't flinch. "Oh, that was a mistake. Don't be so sensitive." "I'm not sensitive," I said. "I'm observant." She rolled her eyes and walked away. "You always make everything so dramatic, Ocean. It's exhausting." When she was gone, I turned off the lights one by one. The silence returned, thicker this time, pressing against the walls. I sat at the kitchen table long after dark, tracing circles in the dust left by forgotten glasses. Later that night, I pulled out the old box I'd kept hidden under my bed. Inside were scraps of Mom's handwriting, shopping lists, old recipes, an unfinished letter to someone named Ellison. I'd never paid attention to it before. Now, it felt like a clue. I spread everything across the floor, sorting through the past as if I could piece myself back together from it. I didn't find what I was looking for. No deed, no will, no proof. But something shifted inside me. This wasn't about sharing space anymore. It wasn't even about family. It was about survival, mine. For the first time, I realized that silence might have protected me once, but now it was the very thing killing me. I gathered the papers, tucked them back into the box, and placed it on my nightstand. My heart was steady. My mind was clear. If they were writing me out, I would write myself back in, line by line, signature by signature. By the time the sun crept up behind the lace curtains of my bedroom window, I hadn't slept a wink. I'd stared at the ceiling for hours, every breath careful, every thought louder than the last. The house was still, too still, and I knew no one would be up for at least another hour. That gave me just enough time to follow the instinct that had been growing louder with every false smile, every passive-aggressive remark, and every erased photo. I slipped into the hallway, moving softly across the creaky floorboards. The light outside was the kind of soft gold that used to remind me of mornings with Mom, before Callista's voice replaced the sound of gospel music in this house. I reached the study and closed the door gently behind me. The room still smelled faintly of lavender, buried under the sharper scent of whatever diffuser Callista had set up last week. I turned toward Mom's old desk, the heavy oak one she'd used to write Christmas cards and balance checkbooks. It had stood untouched since the funeral. Callista said it was too old-fashioned to keep in the living room. I dropped to my knees and pulled on the bottom drawer. It didn't budge. I tugged again, this time harder. A click. It gave way with a dusty groan. Inside, I found a stack of brittle envelopes, old bank statements, and a small manila folder. At the bottom of the pile was something sealed with wax, a sticky note pressed to the front. "Ocean, this is yours. Do not doubt it. Mom." My breath hitched. My hands were steady. I peeled the seal away and pulled out the document inside. The paper was stiff, edges slightly yellowed. It was a notarized deed, clear, unmistakable. My name. Only mine. I read every word twice. Then a third time. I sat back on my heels and let it sink in. Every time Callista had told people I was just staying here, every time she'd made a joke about me being the quiet one, every silent meal I'd served while she played hostess, she had been performing on a stage that legally belonged to me. This house wasn't a temporary arrangement or a shared space. It was mine, and she had known. I stood up slowly, the folder held to my chest. The weight of the document felt heavier than it should, like it had absorbed every suppressed word I hadn't spoken in 2 years. The hallway looked different now, not smaller, but sharper. Each photo on the wall jumped out at me, framed memories of the Moore family. Pictures of Callista in matching pajamas with Ronan and their son. Not a single frame included me, not even the old ones. She'd replaced them all. In the dining room, where our family portrait once hung, now stood a blown-up photo of Callista in front of the house, arms crossed, looking like the woman of the estate. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I took a quiet breath and began to count everything that was no longer mine, except now, I realized, all of it was. Later that afternoon, while Callista took a call in the garden and Ronan was out at work, I sat on my bed with the document spread out before me. I scanned it into my phone and uploaded it to a secure drive. I emailed a copy to myself and saved another to a flash drive I slipped into my sock drawer. Then I walked downstairs, picked a sticky note from the kitchen counter and wrote, "You forgot someone." I walked back into the hallway and chose a frame, the one in the center of the wall, and stuck the note behind it, out of view but still present. Just like me. No shouting, no confrontation, not yet. That evening, I made dinner without saying a word. Callista didn't notice. She was scrolling through her phone, talking about a new throw rug she'd seen online. "Something neutral," she said. "This house needs a more modern vibe." I nodded, stirred the pot, set the table. But something in me had shifted. After the meal, I sat alone in the den with the document open in my lap. I traced my name with my fingertip. It was strange how something printed in black ink could restore years of feeling unseen. "You can't be erased from something that legally belongs to you," I said out loud. My voice didn't shake. The walls didn't echo it back. They didn't need to. They already knew. And so did I. The deed wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a plan. Next, I needed someone who could say, under oath, that I wasn't wrong. The following morning carried the kind of stillness that presses against your ribs. I watched the sunlight spill across the dining table, glinting off the edges of the documents I had left there the night before. The deed was right where I had placed it, clean, legal, undeniable, but a voice in my head whispered, "You'll need more than paper when people lie for a living." So, I folded it carefully, slipped it into a brown envelope, and stepped outside. The air was heavy, warm even for Charleston, and the cicadas had already begun their chorus. My hands were steady as I locked the door behind me, though my heart thudded like it was counting seconds. The walk to Ellison's house took nearly 40 minutes. He lived in an old brick home tucked behind a canopy of oaks near the Battery, the kind of place where time seemed to slow down. Ellison had been my mother's lawyer for 20 years. He was the man who'd handled everything when she passed, the man I hadn't seen since the funeral because Callista had assured me she took care of all the legal details. When he opened the door, his gray eyebrows lifted slightly. Then came a smile, soft but knowing. "Ocean," he said, using my full name like he always did. "I was wondering when you'd come by." Inside, his home smelled faintly of paper and pipe tobacco. I sat across from him at his desk, the one that had probably outlived several clients. Without speaking, I placed the deed in front of him. He didn't even unfold it. "You found it," he murmured, more a statement than a question. "Yes." My voice came out lower than I expected. I needed to make sure it wasn't just a dream. Ellison leaned back, eyes narrowing with thought. Then, after a moment, he stood and walked to a tall cabinet at the far end of the room. From a locked drawer, he pulled out an envelope that looked older than I was. The seal was cracked with time, but it hadn't been opened. He carried it over like it weighed more than its paper could justify. "I was waiting for you," he said quietly. "Your mother told me not to mail this unless she passed, and unless Callista tried something she shouldn't." He slid the envelope across the desk. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was the original will, notarized, signed, and dated in my mother's tidy script. Every line confirmed what the deed had already said. The house, all its contents, belonged to me. But tucked inside the same envelope was a note in her handwriting, brief but sharp enough to pierce me. "If Callista ever uses her voice louder than Ocean's truth, let the law speak instead." I stared at those words for a long moment before looking up. "She knew." "She did," Ellison replied. "Your mother had faith in both of you, too much maybe. She thought love would settle things." I nodded, pressing the paper against my chest. It felt like touching her hand again, just for a second. Before I left, Ellison handed me another envelope, smaller, unmarked. "Your father left this behind years ago," he said. "He never mailed it. I think you deserve to read it." I opened it outside, sitting on the stone steps of Ellison's porch. The handwriting was rough, hurried, but familiar. "Ocean, if you're reading this, it means I wasn't brave enough to say it to your face. I let Callista control too much after your mother passed. I thought I was keeping peace, but I was just avoiding guilt. This house, your mother's house, was always meant for you. Not because of who paid for it, but because you cared for it. You saw it as home, not property. I hope one day you'll forgive me for letting her make you feel small." I folded the letter and sat there for a while, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Vindication, maybe. Or simply relief that someone had finally admitted what I always knew. The walk home was quiet. The streets were empty except for the sound of a church bell somewhere in the distance. Each step felt lighter, more deliberate. I had evidence, I had words, and now I had the truth. When I reached the house, I didn't hesitate. I went straight upstairs, spread everything out on my bed. The deed, the will, both letters. I scanned them with my phone and uploaded each file into a locked drive labeled Proof of Ownership. Then I made 2 hard copies and sealed them in separate folders. One stayed hidden in my closet. The other I slipped under the lining of Mom's old jewelry box. As evening came, I could hear Callista laughing downstairs, her voice echoing through the vents. She was on the phone again, telling someone about our house, the one she said she and Ronan were slowly making their own. I didn't interrupt. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, brewed tea, and sat at the table. The steam fogged my glasses, blurring the edges of everything. I thought of Mom's handwriting again. Let the law speak instead. I whispered to the empty room, no more post-it notes, no more silence. After dinner, I went about the house as usual, watering the plants, folding laundry, fixing a curtain rod that had been crooked for months. I did it not out of duty, but as a quiet reminder. I belonged here. The next morning, Callista walked into the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. "Ocean," she said in that polished tone of hers. "I hope you don't mind, but we're hosting a little get-together next week. Just a few friends. You don't have to worry about cooking this time. We'll order catering." I smiled faintly. "That's thoughtful." She looked up, slightly suspicious of my calm. "You're not upset?" "No," I said, pouring coffee. "You'll get exactly what you've planned for." She blinked, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, stirring sugar into the mug. "Just thinking out loud." For the rest of the week, I kept busy, fixing small things, taking long walks, reading in the garden when she wasn't around. Every moment felt like preparation for something that hadn't happened yet, but was already inevitable. When night fell, I'd sit in my room, the letters and documents spread out under the soft glow of my bedside lamp. I'd read them until the words became a shield around me. They thought I was still the quiet sister, the obedient one, the shadow in the house. They didn't realize that silence isn't weakness, it's patience gathering strength. And soon, that patience would speak louder than Callista ever could. They threw a party to celebrate what they thought they owned, and I served the drinks knowing exactly what I'd serve next. I cleaned up the last glass slowly, letting the warm water run over my hands longer than needed. From the kitchen, I could still hear faint echoes of laughter fading into the hallway, the occasional clink of a fork left behind on a plate. The air smelled of roses and shrimp cocktail. Callista had chosen the menu herself. Elegant, but effortless, she called it. I'd spent the morning setting tables, polishing silver, and lighting candles I didn't buy. I wasn't asked to help. I just did it. Quietly, methodically. Not because I was trying to please anyone, but because I needed to see everything, to move through each room unnoticed. By 6 p.m., the guests started arriving. Ronan's family showed up first, followed by a few of Callista's friends from high school. I recognized most of them from photos she'd insisted on replacing the family frames with. She greeted each guest with the same glossy smile she used at church, the one that said she was too put together to ever be wrong. "This is our home now," I heard her say more than once. "It's been a journey, but we're finally settled." And they believed her. Of course they did. She wore confidence like perfume, strong, sweet, a little too much. When I passed through the dining room carrying a tray of wine glasses, a woman in pearls gave me a smile I'd seen before, the kind reserved for caterers or assistants. She leaned toward Callista and whispered something that made them both laugh softly. I kept walking. Then came the cake. It stood in the center of the dining table, 3 tiers, white fondant, and a phrase written in cursive gold across the top. Our home. Our legacy. If there was a knife nearby, I didn't notice it at first. What caught my eye was the way Callista stood next to it, one hand on Ronan's arm, the other holding a flute of champagne. She gave a short speech, her voice delicate and proud. "We've sacrificed so much to keep this family together," she said. "This house has become more than just walls. It's where we've built something lasting. Ronan and I are so grateful to all of you for supporting us." People clapped. One of Ronan's cousins shouted, "You earned this, Callista!" And then, as if she hadn't already twisted the knife, she added, "It hasn't always been easy, especially with family transitions. But we're patient. Some people just need time to figure things out." Several heads turned toward me, subtly. Some nodded as if they understood. A few even smiled, like they were proud of her grace. I stood near the doorway, holding a tray of lemon bars, and nodded back. I said nothing. I didn't blink. But inside, I took note of every syllable. As the evening wore on, I moved between the kitchen and the patio, offering drinks, picking up plates, watching Callista shine like a chandelier. Then came the moment that almost cracked me. An older woman, Callista's godmother, I think, hugged her tight and whispered, I'm so glad this house is finally yours. You've earned it. Callista beamed. Ronan placed a hand on her back. I turned, walked back to the kitchen, and put a dish in the sink. My hands trembled, only once, but I gripped the edge of the counter until the feeling passed. Later, while carrying out the trash, I caught Ronan looking at me differently, not like before, when I was a shadow in the corner, but like a man realizing there was a door left unlocked. He pulled Callista aside near the stairwell. I stayed out of view, but heard enough. "Are you sure this party was a good idea?" he asked quietly. Callista laughed. "Don't be paranoid. Ocean wouldn't dare. She's lucky we even let her stay." I heard the words, felt them settle into my chest like concrete. Back in my room, I sat at my desk and opened the folder where I'd neatly stored every piece of proof. The deed, the will, Mom's note to Ellison, Dad's letter, screenshots of Callista's social posts painting me as a burden. I made copies, printed them, tucked them into 3 envelopes, one for Callista, one for Ronan, one for me. The party was still going by the time I came back downstairs, this time only to observe. Guests were scattered across the living room, sipping cocktails and admiring the framed photos Callista had carefully hung. Her, Ronan, their child. Not a single one of me. In the dining room, the cake had been sliced. I stood beside the empty serving platter and picked up one of the golden forks. I turned it over in my hand like a coin. By 10 p.m., the house quieted. Guests began to leave, offering hugs and kind words about Callista's strength, and what a blessing it was that she managed to hold the family together. I walked them out, smiled, said thank you. I was polite. Warm, even. Back in the kitchen, I washed the final dish, one of the crystal wine glasses. As I placed it upside down on the drying rack, I allowed myself a small, real smile. Because tomorrow, I wouldn't be serving drinks. I'd be serving something far colder. The morning came earlier than I expected. I didn't need an alarm. My thoughts had woken me long before the sun had the chance. The smell of last night's wine still lingered faintly in the air, mixed with the soft hum of the refrigerator and the clink of dishes stacked in the sink. I tied my hair back, poured a cup of coffee, and walked straight to the study. Mom's old desktop sat there, the same one she used to pay bills and check the neighborhood watch emails. The machine was slow to wake, its fan whirring softly. When the screen flickered to life, I opened the folder labeled Security Footage. The files dated back years, some grainy, some broken, but one file stood out, recently modified. My fingers hovered over the mouse before I clicked play. The footage rolled in silence, tinted in the faint green of night vision. The timestamp showed 2 weeks ago, 2:43 a.m. There she was, Callista. I watched as she slipped into my room, her hair tied up, her phone light guiding her steps. She went straight to my dresser, opening the drawers carefully, one after another, until she found the folder I'd kept hidden, the one holding copies of the deed. She took out the papers, snapped several photos with her phone, and slid everything back exactly as it was. I sat there for a long moment, the cursor frozen over the pause button. It wasn't shock I felt. It was a strange calm, like the moment before lightning hits. I replayed the clip once, then twice, memorizing the shape of her movements, the way she smiled faintly to herself before leaving. That smile sealed it for me. I exported the file and saved it to a flash drive, labeling it Proof MP4. Around noon, the mail arrived, a thick envelope addressed to resident. I opened it out of habit, assuming it was another flyer or bill. Instead, it was an invoice, complete with permits and itemized charges for kitchen remodel consultation, paint color approval, and flooring estimates. The name at the top, Callista Moore. The address below, my house. That was the final piece. I took a deep breath, poured another cup of coffee, and began assembling everything on the kitchen table. The deed, the will, the handwritten notes, the letter from my father, screenshots of Callista's social media posts calling me a dependent. And now, the invoice and the video. The table looked like a battlefield laid out in documents. When I called Ellison, he answered on the second ring. "I need to know," I said. "If someone impersonates a property owner, what happens?" He didn't hesitate. They get served, he said simply, legally and swiftly. That was all I needed. By the afternoon, I had printed everything, each piece marked with timestamps and dates. I sealed 3 envelopes, one for Callista, one for Ronan, one for the county property office. But the 4th, the one that mattered most, I left blank. The house was quiet that evening. I heard Callista upstairs talking on the phone, her voice dripping with that same smugness I'd come to recognize. Yes, the renovation's next month. Ronan wants to expand the kitchen. It'll be our dream home. I smiled to myself. When the call ended, I went upstairs. I left one envelope on her vanity, tucked neatly between perfume bottles and jewelry she'd never paid for. The second went on Ronan's nightstand, next to the watch he polished obsessively but never wore. Then I walked downstairs and placed the final envelope on the dining table. I stood there for a moment, looking at it under the chandelier's glow. The irony wasn't lost on me. That table had seen every version of me, the quiet one who served, the forgotten one who watched, and now the one who was taking it all back. By the time Callista came down for dinner, the house smelled faintly of roasted chicken and rosemary. She walked in, her heels clicking against the tile. "Ocean," she said casually. "What's for dinner?" I stepped aside, gesturing toward the table. "This," I said. "This is the only thing you'll be served tonight." She frowned, confused, then walked over. The envelope sat there, unassuming, but her instincts must have told her something was wrong. "What is this?" "Open it." She tore the seal and unfolded the papers. The first page was the eviction notice, the next, the deed, and below it, copies of her invoices, her posts, her signature on the permit requests. Her face drained. For the first time in years, Callista didn't look composed. "You forged this," she said sharply. "You're lying!" Without a word, I slid my phone across the table. The video played. Her voice trembled slightly. "You think this will hold up? You're pathetic." Ronan entered halfway through the clip, freezing as he saw her on the screen rifling through my drawers. "Callista," he said quietly, "what is that?" She turned on him instantly. "You're not seriously taking her side." But he didn't answer. Something in her broke then. She grabbed the papers and threw them onto the floor, the sound echoing through the room like thunder. "You've been plotting this, haven't you?" she screamed. "You just sat here waiting for me to slip up." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. "You have 30 days, I said, my tone calm enough to make her stop mid-sentence. "And I have everything in writing. Let's not make this uglier than it already is." For a moment, all I could hear was her breathing. Heavy, uneven, desperate. Then, for the first time since she moved into this house, Callista had no comeback. Ronan sank into a chair, rubbing his forehead. "She's serious," he muttered, mostly to himself. "Yes," I replied softly. "I am." I gathered the remaining papers, slipped them back into my bag, and walked toward the door. Behind me, Callista stood frozen, her hands trembling over the table she once called hers. At the doorway, I paused and turned slightly. "Mom told me once," I said, "that this house would always belong to the one who loved it enough to protect it. I guess now you understand what that meant." She didn't respond. The air was still when I stepped outside. The porch light flickered softly, moths dancing around it like fragile secrets. I sat down on the steps and watched the horizon turn dark. Inside, faint sounds carried through the walls. Callista crying, Ronan pacing, drawers opening and closing. I closed my eyes. The anger didn't feel like fire anymore. It felt like air. Clean, light. They built a kingdom out of my silence, and now it was burning from the inside out. The following morning, sunlight filtered in through the kitchen windows, soft and warm, touching the edges of the dining table where everything had just ended, or started over. The room smelled faintly of lemon oil and old wood, but it was missing something. Tension. For the first time in years, the house was silent, not because someone demanded it, but because no one was yelling over it. I sat at the head of the table, dressed in my mother's favorite cardigan. My coffee steamed gently beside me. A pen sat in my right hand, gliding over a sheet of paper with deliberate strokes. I wrote just one line. "You took my seat. Now take the door." Then I folded the paper, tucked it into an envelope, and laid it atop the small stack of documents in front of me. The same set I'd prepared the night before, but this time it wasn't just proof, it was action. Outside, I could hear the shuffle of footsteps upstairs, doors opening, voices murmuring. Callista was awake. So was Ronan. I stood and placed everything in the center of the table. I set 4 chairs out, evenly spaced. I didn't need to rehearse anything. I wasn't performing. I was concluding. By 9:15 a.m., they walked in, still half-dressed, still expecting breakfast. Callista wore a silk robe, her hair pinned sloppily, and Ronan had that same sleepy detachment he always carried when things were about to go wrong, but hadn't hit him yet. They froze when they saw Ellison sitting at the far end of the table, alongside a woman they didn't recognize. Slim, sharp-eyed, carrying a notary seal. "Good morning," I said evenly, motioning toward the chairs. "Have a seat." Callista blinked rapidly. "What is this?" Ronan cleared his throat. "Ocean, what's going on?" Ellison leaned forward slightly. "A formal meeting, Mr. Moore. Property clarification." They hesitated, but sat. Callista crossed her arms, tapping her nails on the table. "If this is about the cake again, it's about everything," I interrupted. Calmly, I reached for the envelope in front of me and slid it toward them. "You've had your say. You've had your stage. Now, here's mine, signed, sealed, and enforceable." Inside the envelope were all the papers they thought I'd never find. The notarized deed naming me the sole owner, the original will, an official eviction notice, a notarized timeline for vacating the property. Callista opened it slowly, then skimmed each document with a frown that deepened into something meaner with every page. "This is a joke," she hissed. "You think this piece of paper changes everything? This house has been ours." "No," I said simply. "You've lived in it. You've rearranged it. You've played house in it. But it was never yours." She stood suddenly, pushing her chair back. "You tricked us. You've been scheming behind our backs." "I documented," I replied. "There's a difference." "You're nothing without this house," she spat. "You think you're important now because you got your hands on a few documents?" I remained seated. "You've had years to fix this, to treat me like a sister, to even act like a decent guest. But you didn't. So now I'm doing what the law was always prepared to do." Ronan opened his mouth to speak, but froze when I reached into my folder and pulled out a signed copy of his name on one of the renovation invoices. He looked at it, pale. "I didn't know." "You approved charges under her name," I said, sliding it across the table. "You acted like owners. You'll leave like trespassers." The notary leaned in and handed Callista the official notice. "You have 30 days to vacate the property. This document is filed and time-stamped." "This is ridiculous," Callista snapped. "You're throwing out your own family?" Ellison's voice came in quiet but strong. "You were given chances. You ignored warnings. This is not revenge, it's consequence." I stood, my chair barely making a sound. "This house belonged to someone who taught me never to yell, just to be clear." Callista turned toward Ronan, as if expecting backup, but he just stared at the documents, jaw tight, hands folded. He didn't say a word. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "You've been playing the victim this whole time, and now you're kicking us out." "I've never played the victim," I said. "I just finally stopped pretending I didn't see what you were doing." She grabbed the papers in front of her and stormed out of the room. Ronan followed, slower, but didn't look back. I let the silence return. By the afternoon, they'd packed enough bags to fill the trunk of Ronan's car. They didn't speak as they passed me in the hallway. Callista had tears in her eyes, but her mouth was clenched tight, determined not to give me the satisfaction. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I held the door open and let them walk through it one final time. When they left, I stood on the porch, listening as the car pulled away, the gravel crunching beneath tires that had stayed too long. The wind picked up slightly. It was quiet again. Really quiet. Not the kind of quiet that suffocates. The kind that frees. I walked back inside, took my time moving from room to room. The photos were still askew, the walls bare in spots where her life had tried to replace mine. In the living room, I found a box marked Donate. Inside were frames, old family pictures she'd removed, probably months ago. I reached in and pulled out the one of Mom and me standing in front of this house, arms linked, smiling wide. That evening, I pulled out the step stool and rehung the photo in the hallway, exactly where it had been before Callista took it down. Then I stood back, hands on my hips, and took a deep breath. This wasn't just about ownership. It wasn't even about justice. It was about presence. Being seen, being heard, being here. I didn't just take back the house, I reclaimed the silence they thought would bury me. The days that followed felt like an exhale after years of holding my breath. For the first time in a long while, the walls didn't feel like they were pressing in on me. The silence wasn't heavy or punishing. It was clean, like a freshly laundered sheet pulled tight across a mattress. It had been exactly 28 days since Callista and Ronan left. The morning after they'd moved out, I walked through each room alone, barefoot, floorboards creaking under memories. The furniture they didn't take sat awkwardly, as if it too had been playing along in someone else's fantasy. I touched everything with purpose, not to rearrange, but to reacquaint myself with what had always been mine. The scent of her perfume no longer clung to the hallway. The faint smell of paint, lemon oil, and something earthy had returned, what the house smelled like before all the repackaging. Ronan's voice, once a dull drone from his endless Zoom meetings, was gone too. In its place, only quiet, sacred quiet. I started the morning in the garage. I wanted to clear it out, to make room for things that mattered again. In the far back corner, half buried under old boxes labeled seasonal, I found one that had Callista's handwriting scrawled across the top. To donate. I pulled it forward and opened it slowly. Inside were mismatched frames, yellowed notes, and an old iPad I hadn't seen in years. I dusted it off and plugged it in. It took several minutes to power up, the battery long forgotten. When the screen finally lit, a single video appeared under a folder marked Private. I tapped it. There she was. My mother. The camera was slightly tilted, the lighting too warm, but she looked just like I remembered. Her voice came through, soft and certain. Ocean, if you're watching this, then it means you've made it to the other side. I didn't blink. I barely breathed. They will try to take it from you, your place, your worth. But this house knows you, and so do I. It was always meant to be yours, not because of paper, but because of presence. You kept it alive. You gave it breath. That's what makes it home. She paused, smiling softly. I hope you're sitting at the table when you see this. At the head, where you belong. My hand covered my mouth, not from grief, but from the sudden flood of peace that washed through me. It wasn't sadness I felt. It was recognition. It was as if all the noise, all the lies, all the years of being pushed aside had melted in that moment. I closed the tablet and held it against my chest. Then I stood up and walked back inside, into the kitchen where I cooked myself a simple dinner, nothing special. Grilled vegetables, rice, and a glass of tea. I set the table with a single place setting, just one plate, one fork. And this time, I sat where Callista once claimed her throne, the head of the table. It didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like gravity had finally reset. I ate slowly, thinking of all the nights I had stood while everyone else sat, thinking of how many meals I had prepared without tasting. And now, with no audience, no performance, I was finally fed. Later that night, I logged into social media, just out of habit. I didn't expect to find anything. But there she was, Callista, smiling beside a box of houseplants and a pile of unopened cardboard. The caption read, New beginnings, old mistakes. I didn't comment. I didn't react. I logged out. Some things don't need a response. The next morning, I drove across town to the local historical society. I had emailed them last week about volunteer opportunities. It felt like the right time to give back, not just to the town, but to stories like mine. The woman at the front desk, a retired teacher named Marie, handed me a stack of documents to sort. You'll be cataloging records of women whose stories were lost in history, she said with a smile. Mostly handwritten notes, old letters, Photos that never made it into the books. I ran my fingers over the paper gently. Some stories, I murmured, need to be retold by those who were written out. Marie looked at me a moment, then nodded. Amen to that. Over the next few days, I found rhythm again. Quiet, steady, mine. In the evenings, I walked through the house, not to check or correct, but to feel its heartbeat again. On the last day of that week, I pulled out one of the last remaining photos I had of myself as a child, 8 years old, standing in front of the porch in overalls, gap-toothed grin, my hand in Mom's. I walked down the hall, where her portrait now hung once more. I stood beside it for a moment, then carefully placed the smaller frame beside hers. I stepped back and looked at us, and I whispered, "Now you can watch me grow again." Some victories aren't loud, they're just real, permanent, and finally ours. Sometimes the loudest form of strength is quiet resolve. Ocean didn't yell, she didn't beg. She waited, gathered truth, and let the facts speak. This story isn't just about revenge, it's about reclaiming your space, your voice, and your worth when everyone else tries to write you out. Have you ever been made to feel invisible in your own family? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful, real-life inspired stories like this one.